All right, all right, all right. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Obviously, some more folks will probably slide in as we get moving here, but in the meantime, I want to welcome everybody here. We are so happy that you could join us. Whether you're here live as it's happening or you're watching the recording later, we really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about our work and the impact we've had here so far. We are very thrilled to have such a diverse group of attendees that are going to join us today from across the country, some internationally, and across sectors, including academia, philanthropy, and advocacy. We know that we are a grassroots organization, but that this work has regional and national implications, and so we are honored to have all of you here with us. My name is Kevin Scott here at Community Spring, and today we are super excited to share the groundbreaking research results of Just Income, which is our guaranteed income program for formerly incarcerated people right here in Gainesville, Florida. We are in Alachua County, Florida. This has been years in the making. Tonight, we're going to hear from the world of research, from participants, and from advocates about how guaranteed income is disrupting the revolving door of poverty and incarceration and what's going to come next. So let's get into it. Just a quick rundown on what's ahead. Lindsay Kallman, the executive director here at Community Spring, is going to start us off with an overview of our nonprofit and our vision. Julius Serving and I are going to share some background about ourselves and the Just Income program, why Community Spring created it, and what makes it unique. Dr. Lucius Couloute is going to walk us through the research findings on the impact of guaranteed income. We're going to hear about Murray Wilson, who is a Just Income participant, and how this program has affected his life. And then Dr. Clint Smith will discuss the broader implications of guaranteed income and economic justice. Finally, I'll wrap it up with some closing thoughts and how you can support this work moving forward. At the core of all of this is one simple truth, is that there is now concrete evidence that guaranteed income is a powerful tool for healing the economic and emotional harm of incarceration. And with that, I will pass it over to Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's so awesome to be here. My name is Lindsay Kallman. I am the executive director of Community Spring, and love seeing this chat blowing up now that we have it on. So many amazing people on this webinar tonight, and it is such an honor to be here with you. So thank you for joining us. So I co-founded Community Spring about 5 years ago. I can't believe it. This work has taken me on a journey in ways that I couldn't have imagined. My team is comprised of people who have been impacted by the systems that we seek to address. And every day, they teach me so much. I am so inspired by them and deeply grateful to have the opportunity to lead this organization. The work that my team has done, and in particular on the project that you're going to hear about tonight, astounds me. Y'all are in for a real treat tonight. Yes, we are here to learn about guaranteed income for formerly incarcerated folks, but also this is a celebration. Tonight is about celebrating the power of trust and dignity. It is about what happens when we invest in people and not punishment. So first, I want to give you all a little background about Community Spring. Community Spring is a grassroots economic justice organization. As I mentioned, this year is our 5-year anniversary. We have spent 5 years growing, learning, and honing our framework for economic justice. Next slide. Economic justice is about collective well-being and meaningful access to income, power, and community that all humans need to flourish. We believe that everyone needs access to income for economic stability, power to transform unjust systems, and community that offers belonging and connection. These are the 3 core principles that shape our interrelated programs. We have Just Income, Just Power, and Just Community. Next slide. We carry out our vision of economic justice by disrupting the cycle of poverty and mass incarceration. This was a major learning that we've taken away from the last 5 years. We pride ourselves in being co-created alongside impacted people. And over the last 5 years, we just kept hearing over and over again about how mass incarceration is both the cause and effect of poverty. It's clear to us now that to advance economic justice, we must end this harmful cycle. I just want to take one more minute before I turn it back over to Kevin to do a quick overview of our 3 programs. So Just Income is what we'll focus on today. It's a guaranteed income program that provides monthly payments for a year to people who have been recently released from incarceration. We just launched our 3rd cohort in January, which is really exciting. And we've distributed over $1 million to people coming home. Through this work, we've become leaders in the guaranteed income movement. We've consulted with over 30 jurisdictions across the country, as you can see in this map on the slide, that have sought to learn from us on how to do this work well. Just Power is our program that creates structural change. So we have a fellowship where we hire justice-impacted people to organize around systemic issues that they have faced personally. Many of these fellowship projects go on to become ongoing advocacy campaigns where an impacted person and our policy director work side by side to transform unjust systems. And this is an example of how Community Spring, we pair lived experience with technical skills to make bold change. Our advocacy has brought about some really amazing structural changes. For example, the first fair chance hiring ordinance in Florida, the elimination of 15 fines and fees, and locally at our jail, we now have free phone calls. Our newest program area is Just Community, and that's our narrative change shop. So we do narrative change activities that work with impacted people to reshape public perception and build a sense of belonging, shifting the underlying assumptions that drive so many of the problems that we seek to address is critical to achieving lasting change. I want to leave you with one last thing. We are based out of Gainesville, Florida. We do this work in one of the most hostile states for formerly incarcerated people. We have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country and a long legacy of racism and incarceration. In fact, in Florida, we're one of the few states that forces prisoners to work without pay under the threat of violence. And yet, despite every systemic barrier stacked against us, what we do works. Our county has the most progressive fines and fees reform in the state. We are one of the first fair chance hiring ordinances in the Southeast region. Our guaranteed income program, as you will see, is held up as a model for the rest of the country to follow. People from all over the country look to us for roadmaps about how to make change in challenging climates. We believe that durable change happens at a grassroots level, and if done well, that's what drives regional and national change. If we can do it here, it can be done anywhere. And with that, I want to pass the mic back to Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If you joined late or you haven't met me yet, pleased to meet you. My name is Kevin Scott. I'm the program director here at Just Income. Just Income was developed by and for formerly incarcerated people, and I am one of them. This work is deeply personal. We know firsthand the barriers that people face when they come home from prison, and we built Just Income to directly address those challenges. And just word of warning, I'm probably going to cry 100 times, so strap in for that. Just a little bit of my experience here. When I got out of prison, I slept in the parking lot of a homeless shelter. You can go to the next slide, actually. I didn't sleep inside the homeless shelter. I slept outside. I couldn't bring myself to go in. If it's not clear from this picture, this is our local homeless shelter, and it is a decommissioned prison. It is a phenomenal organization, but when I got out of prison, the thought of trading one set of bars for another was pretty unbearable to me. So I actually slept outside in the parking lot. It was freezing. That is how I came home. That was 9 years and 2 weeks ago. My freedom was so complicated. There were tears of joy when I hugged my daughter again, when I felt the ocean. But there were also tears of terror because reincarceration loomed over me. It felt inevitable, not because of a crime, but because I couldn't afford the cost of my own freedom. In Florida, prisoners are released with $50. and a mountain of debt. You are in a deep, deep hole from the moment you step out. There's probation fees, court costs, drug testing. The fine is staggering. If you can't pay those payments, you will be going back in. You will be reincarcerated. It is just a constant feeling. So in a world that locked me out of jobs and housing while carrying the trauma of incarceration, like how was I supposed to make it? How can anyone make it? I had extraordinary debt, the constant threat of reincarceration, and no opportunities. Like the math was wildly against me. And that's not a unique story. It is systemic. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people come home from prison only to immediately face barriers designed to make them fail. Our society has built this opportunity structure that shuts formerly incarcerated people out of the resources that they need to survive. And our communities pay the price because poverty drives criminalized acts of survival. And when people are kept in financial hardship, reincarceration rises. It's a cycle. The cycle's a trap. Zooming in a little further here locally, nearly a quarter of probation violations are simply because people can't afford their freedom. Supervision costs, ankle monitors, mandatory classes, more fines and fees. They all create these impossible financial burdens that disproportionately trap low-income and Black communities in cycles of incarceration. So failure to pay isn't just a hardship, it's a direct path back to prison. The crime here now isn't what you've done, it's what you don't have. The real crime is your bank account. You are too poor to be free. I want to bring in Julius Irving, who is our community engagement coordinator here and a formerly incarcerated person himself, to join me in giving just a little more background on what we've done and why. It is worth noting that Julius and I both experienced our local homeless shelter, the old prison, not just as guests, but later on as employees. Years after staying there, we both returned to help and support people who are facing the same struggles that we once did. Really honored to have Julius on our team here with us now. Julius, if you could just share a little bit about what you have seen from your own life about what it's like to come home without financial stability.
Okay, first I just wanted to say, I'm really thankful for Community Spring because I lived a life in need of every help agency that Gainesville had to offer. And I can recall like thinking about all these $1 million agencies and how none of the help never found me. But Community Spring found me through a friend that was a part of the first fellowship class. Indirectly put money in my pocket way before I even knew who Matt and Lindsay was. So I'm just thankful to be a part of the team. And as far as incarceration goes, returning back to society and the money barriers, I quickly found out that freedom isn't free. Freedom isn't free at all. I remember believing all of the stereotypes that maybe I didn't have because I wasn't working hard enough. And then actually getting a job, right, because I needed money, and finding out that it cost me to have the job until I got my first paycheck. I got hired, but I still needed work boots. I still needed a way to get to work, and all of this like with no money. So it was just a very difficult situation. And then I got two jobs. I believe now that two jobs is for two people. But working two jobs in a time for money structure, it just and still not have enough of my bills. Imagine working two jobs, right? Two jobs, having no time for mental health, no time for physical health, no time for your kids. It's only time for work, right? And still not having quite enough. I only had enough to pay bills, and I can remember living in a time where I had two jobs, working, trying my hardest, still being very much mentally, emotionally depressed. And holidays would always just put me in a depressed state because I had to find money that I just didn't have. My family just didn't have or whatever. And then I found out too that there's a lot of help for women and children and old people, but there was no help for me. So money is definitely important. It's a huge barrier between a lot of things that I needed. Good mental health services, quality food, good doctors, all of that stuff. There's a money barrier in between it, and most free services aren't good services. So I could go on and on and on because I've been in need almost my whole life up until now. I'm thankful that now I'm finally in a little bit more of a stable financial state, and I'm able to have time for my family, myself, and mental health. But there's so many people that I still know that are still part of my direct family and friends who struggle with this same thing. I've also saw a lot of people that I know get just guaranteed income, and it's changed their lives. I've seen a lot of grown people tell me that the 1 year they got guaranteed income was the best year of their lives, and they're older people. So yeah, I'm forever an advocate for Community Spring and what we do here, and also an advocate for the guaranteed income program.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Julius. I might tap you
Sure.
back in later to hear a little bit more
Okay,
about
sure.
what you've seen as the impacts from folks in your life. Thank you so much, man. So yeah, we knew from our own experience, coming home from incarceration with nothing is an absolute setup, and that we had to build something different. So we tackled the problem head on with guaranteed income. In 2022, we launched Just Income, and we provided 115 people, each released from incarceration within the last 6 months, with $1,000 the first month, and then $600 a month for the next 11 months after that. No strings attached. Obviously, one of our distinct features is that we are designed and led by formerly incarcerated people. So we don't just study these challenges, we have absolutely lived them. And that lived experience is expertise, and it allows us to build real trust and connection with our participants because we know exactly what they're up against. People like Julius and I, we know what it's like to come home and struggle, to be rejected at every turn, to feel the weight of how every sentence is a life sentence. But we believe that we could build something very powerful here. But belief wasn't enough. We knew that we were going to have to prove it. So we partnered with UPenn and Dr. Lucius Couloute to conduct a randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard for research. And this was going to ensure that we had rigor and credibility on our side, making Just Income one of the most rigorously studied guaranteed income programs in the country. So our results are not just anecdotal, they're measurable, reliable, and repeatable. And so today we're going to look at the impact of our pilot year, which was launched during a time of skyrocketing inflation when no other support existed for formerly incarcerated people in our community. Our only interventions here were income and kindness. That's it. And we're not looking at just immediate effects. We're going to look at the impact, including 6 months after the GI ended. And just on a super personal note, meeting and getting to know our participants is the privilege of a lifetime. These are some of the most resilient and incredible people that I have ever known. I know some folks are going to be on the call live now and watching this later, and I just want you to know that you mean the world to us. We thank you so much for taking a chance on us. So, these are not just statistics, these are real lives. This is mixed methods research, which combines rigorous data with deep qualitative work. With that, I'd like to bring in Dr. Lucius Couloute. Dr. Couloute is a professor of sociology at Trinity College and a leading researcher on the causes and consequences of mass criminalization. His work critically examines the structural barriers to reentry, labor market exploitation, and the impact of direct cash transfers for people with felony records. Previously, Lucius was an analyst at the Prison Policy Initiative, where he produced pivotal research on the intersection of incarceration, employment, and housing, work that has helped shape national conversations on economic justice and reentry. Lucius has been a key research partner for us here at Just Income, bringing not only data-driven analysis, but also a deep humanity to this work. Throughout his research, he made our participants feel safe, seen, and dignified, and that matters more than we can say here. We are incredibly grateful to have him with us here today. Lucius, thanks for being here. I will kick it over to you.
Right. Thank you, Kevin. So first of all, I just want to say, it's a real honor to be here and to be able to share some virtual space with you all, and to be able to, share some of our findings with folks around the country. But before I do, I just want to note that this project and our report has truly been a collaborative one, right? Obviously, Community Spring has spearheaded this program and has really provided amazing leadership and a model, I think, for what care and community can look like. But also, my colleagues and co-authors, including Nidhi Tandon, Hanisha Patel, Sydney Blocker, Stacia West, and Amy Castro, have all been crucial in putting together what we believe, I think, is a really rigorous and profound study on the impact of guaranteed income. Right, so I'm really excited to dig in, though I certainly encourage folks to take a look at the report, which is pretty extensive, but hopefully useful for folks looking for solutions to the dual problems of poverty and reentry. Right. And so with that being said, let's jump into the findings. All right. And so, first and foremost, I'm betting that most people in attendance are wondering if the program was successful, right? Did the money translate into tangible results and benefits? Um, and I think there are multiple ways to define success, right? But if we take a moment to focus just on recidivism or the rate at which people come back into contact with the criminal justice system, the answer to this question is a pretty resounding yes. We did see success, right? So we found that the recidivism rate was 31% lower among the treatment group, so those receiving the money, compared to the control group, those who did not receive the cash, right? And so in terms of actual rates, over 40% of the control group experienced either rearrest or reconviction during the study period, whereas less than 28% of the treatment group recidivated, right? So the reduction was substantial. It was statistically significant. And in terms of magnitude, this was a larger reduction than many other reentry related programs across the country. So we feel pretty good about this top line finding. It suggests that the simple act of supporting people financially, right, through what is often a very challenging post-incarceration period, as Kevin and Julius noted, supporting people through this time creates both safer communities for us all and the potential for significant cost savings, right, due to lower rearrest and reincarceration rates. And so we can go to the next slide. And so there are likely multiple mechanisms at work here, but I think that Cliff summed it up pretty nicely when he said, if I didn't have the guaranteed income, it'd be much more easier for me to fall back and go the wrong way. Because as hard as it is, it'll make you do that, especially when there's not a lot of opportunity. Now it feels like the whole world is coming down on you. So now guess what you're doing? You're reverting back. You can only just revert back, right? So many participants felt as though they often had no choice but to engage in criminalized behaviors in order to survive, right? For those receiving the just income, however, many felt like they no longer had to resort to crimes of survival in order to get by. And so I want to bring Kevin in really quickly, if you don't mind, because you're on the ground. You can maybe speak to what you're seeing and hearing on a daily basis from folks, sort of on this front. So, Kevin, do you want to kind of jump in real quick?
Yeah, we've seen this play out in a few different ways. One of the most striking examples is one of our participants who, starting in 1984, he had not stayed out of prison for longer than 15 months. So he was trapped, and this was all because of poverty. He was trapped in a 40 years, a cycle of just poverty and incarceration over and over and over again. He was selected to be one of the recipients in our pilot year. He got just income, and he has never gone back, even years later, years after the payments stopped. So, just to speak to the power of guaranteed income in dismantling just that hellish revolving door in his life that had so much momentum. This was enough. This was an off-ramp for him. This is all he needed, was just some resources and some investment to disrupt a 40-year cycle. And he dropped by again a couple of weeks ago, and he is still doing great. He just had two knee replacements, and he's healthier than I've ever seen him. He's doing fantastic. So yeah, it's very powerful.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And so, recidivism can be tricky, right? Because of all of the ways in which people are chained to the system, right? But I think this reduction speaks to the profound importance of addressing poverty as a root cause, right? And so I'll move on to increased economic resilience, right? And so we can also think about success as economic stability, right? Does the income smooth out the inevitable financial hurdles that come with life after incarceration? And so what we found was that the treatment group participants were significantly more likely to be able to handle an unexpected bill or emergency expense, right? So, what happens when your car breaks down or when you need to buy new prescription medicine, right? Well, the guaranteed income helped people afford those unexpected expenses. Participants could also better manage really what I would call an unfortunate, awful, right, system of carceral debt that from the beginning puts you in a financial hole, right? So think, probation fees, fees for electronic monitoring, the cost of various, therapies, other legal financial obligations. Um, and again, this is a likely mechanism for the reduction in recidivism that we observed as well, right? You never want people saddled with this carceral debt, but at the very least, the just income made it so that people were less likely to be sent back to jail for being, too poor to pay a fee, right? The money also allowed families to better navigate just the kind of everyday costs of living, which were rising pretty quickly during the study period as well. And I'll get back to this theme on how families were impacted by the money. But for many, this was their first real financial cushion, right? And it was the difference between, keeping your head above water and really drowning in poverty. And so we'll move on to the next slide. And so, if we take Patricia, who noted that the monthly payment of $600 helped her get by, she said, this helped me catch up on a lot of things, right? Especially with my husband being in the hospital and me trying to take care of business from that end. And I ain't got no help. You understand? I ain't got no help, period. Right? So for those who had nowhere else to turn, like Patricia, who actually had been relying upon really exploitive payday loans to make ends meet, the consistent income meant that she could provide for her household in ways that would have simply been impossible otherwise, right? So this kind of new ability to, to manage those daily and sometimes unexpected costs. And we can move on. Thank you. We also know that food insecurity in particular is a problem among criminalized populations. Fortunately, by the end of the pilot, just income recipients experienced very low food security at a rate that was 25% lower than among the control group. So this means, treatment participants experienced, fewer skipped meals, right, or went hungry less often because they had a reliable income support that was not tied to previous offenses or their ability to navigate complicated welfare bureaucracies, right? And we can move to the next slide. And so this reduction in food insecurity is important because Florida, as a state, like some others, is a state where your ability to access welfare supports is mediated by a criminal record. So, Bill, for example, noted that he was disqualified from nutritional assistance, and as he explained, they said, "Well, you got a trafficking charge." I says, "That's 15 years ago. Why can you nail me now for something I did 15 years ago?" But that's the way the system is. Anybody with a trafficking charge can't get food stamps, right? But fortunately, just income came with no such restrictions, right? So it allowed Bill to survive as a man in his 70s who physically can no longer work due to multiple health conditions, right? So the money allowed participants to meet their basic needs, and many felt a certain kind of dignity in their ability to do so as well, right? Now, on the topic of work, I think it's important to directly sort of confront what are maybe some myths around the relationship between guaranteed income and employment, right? And so, in fact, what we found was that the money actually did not decrease employment. Statistically, the rates of employment were the same among both the treatment and control groups. So, or they were not different, right? So these myths suggesting that economic supports automatically and significantly discourage work were entirely unfounded in our data, right? Qualitatively, though, we did find that some participants use their just income to, buy or fix up cars in order to get to and from work. Some reported investing in education and training, like a CDL license, to hopefully one day attain a decent job. A few noted that they used the money in ways that kind of gave them, or the money sort of provided them a sense of labor market agency, right? They could quit the super exploitive job with the abusive supervisor, and we have a story in the report about that. And then they could spend more time sort of looking for jobs with better pay and hopefully some more stability, right? Um, Now, I also want to note that the money isn't necessarily, it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not going to be able to magically erase one's criminal record. So folks did still kind of struggle with, securing job opportunities due to employment discrimination. But at the very least, they had a consistent income supplement to help them through periods of unemployment or underemployment. And the money certainly did not reduce employment, right? So it better allowed folks to kind of navigate sort of the labor market that is often hostile to them. We also know that navigating life with a criminal record is an inherently stressful experience, right? So I talked a little bit about the labor market, but for those coming out of correctional facilities, it's a constant struggle for answers, right? Where are you going to find that job? Where will you find housing? How are you going to feed yourself? Um, you're also subject to unique demands, right? Meet regularly with your PO, pay your fines and fees, find a job, pass a drug test, and so on, right? Or risk reincarceration. So it's a stress-inducing experience, right? But fortunately, we found significantly lower levels of self-reported stress among treatment participants. We also found that those receiving the cash had an increased sense of hope and mattering, right? And so to put it plainly, the money gave participants room to breathe, right? Room to think, to experience a sense of calm amid an otherwise rocky and insecure reentry experience. So many participants reported being able to, think beyond everyday survival and we're actually beginning to plan for the future, right? And so, Kevin, if I could bring you in again, I think, because you saw how on a regular basis the money maybe uh, transformed how people thought about themselves and the world around them. So maybe you could chime in again here as
Yeah,
well.
100%. Yeah, when I think of wellness and like just the impact that the guaranteed income had on people and like just their mental emotional states, it is hard not to think of V, who was a woman who I met while I was actually working at the shelter. She was a survivor of ongoing severe domestic violence. She was stuck there at the shelter. She was struggling to stay clean, and she was just clawing for stability. She was selected for just income, which gave her the resources. So sorry. To escape her abuser, to get into secure housing and address her addiction and reconnect with her children. So years later, she is still clean. She is utterly thriving. And she put it best. She just said, hope goes a long way for people who are accustomed to hopelessness. Could not be said any better than that.
Thank you. And you're right, right? I don't think there's a better way to put it. I think, just to kind of reiterate that sentiment in many ways, I think this is also a powerful quote from Jake, right? Who said, right after getting the money, or as you're getting the money, now you're thinking more positive and you're elevated, you're manifesting, and it brings a whole different aura to your thoughts and dreams and goals. So a little bit of guaranteed income is powerful, right? So the money certainly had material consequences, but it also had profound mental and emotional impacts that did the work of again producing that sense of calm and even clarity, right? Your mental load changes when you have at least some semblance of economic stability. So we'll move on here. And so lastly, before I sort of wrap up, I want to emphasize that the money influenced family dynamics just as much as it affected individual trajectories, right? Um, so mass incarceration creates this forced vulnerability in many ways, right? It makes you dependent upon others, right? So when you're first arrested, right, family members pay bail and coordinate logistics on the outside. When you're incarcerated, family members drive to rural prison towns to visit. They put money on your books. They pay for phone calls. When you're released, they house and feed you, right? So many participants reported having felt like they were a burden on their families, right? But because of the just income, participants then reported like this sort of newfound ability to to contribute, right? They could now pool resources with loved ones and help, pay rent or pay a bill. They could now help with food and groceries. They could take a child to the movies, right? Or, buy them a gift during the holidays, right? And this really matters, I think, for one's sense of belonging, right? So if we move on to the next slide, I'll share a quote from Willie, who I think put it really well when he said it was a blessing because all the years that I wasn't there for them, and now I'm getting the opportunity to help them out when they need something. And what I couldn't do for them and didn't do for them while I was in prison, I'm doing it for my grandkids now, right? And so he felt the pain associated with not being able to provide for his children while he was locked up. But because he was receiving the guaranteed income for the first time in decades, he felt like he was an active contributor to his family, right? So the money facilitated integration broadly, I would argue, but I think it's also important to stress the ways in which a guaranteed income can facilitate family reintegration specifically, and a sense of inclusion and helpfulness as well, right? Um, and so I won't go on much longer, but I do want to say that, it's clear from our study that the money was meaningful. It made a significant impact in a range of domains. And while it cannot be our only answer to this problem of reentry, I do think that it should be a piece of the puzzle, right? So, please dig into the report. We've also put out a twin report on another guaranteed income pilot based in Durham, North Carolina. And so we cover a range of outcomes, many of which I haven't even begun to touch upon. But it is my hope that, at the very least, these reports challenge us to rethink our responses to the twin problems of poverty and mass incarceration today. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Lucius, thank you so much, man, for sharing all of your wisdom, your insight, and just for being an excellent human being. We are so thrilled that this research is finally seeing the light of day. This has been a long time coming, so we're thrilled for what's to come. Murray Wilson, who is one of our participants from the pilot year, was going to be here with us, but he cannot due to illness. There is some nasty stuff going around here right now. So Murray is sorry he couldn't be here, but he said it's okay for me to share some of his story. I cannot share it nearly as beautifully as he does, but I am honored to share at least a little bit of what he would like to have conveyed here. And so Murray was born and raised right here in Gainesville. Like so many formerly incarcerated people, he came from poverty. And he faced enormous barriers after coming into contact with the criminal justice system in his youth. Without resources, he ended up cycling in and out of incarceration for years. So a few years ago, the last time he was incarcerated, he had been sent to prison until someone realized an error in his sentencing. The math was wrong, and he was being called back to court to be sent home. And he told me about sitting in the transport van, returning to court, crying, wondering what his future was going to look like. So you just imagine crying, moving toward freedom. He was that scared. He knew he had no money, no job, no clue how he was going to make it. And all he could think about was how he was going to end up back in prison because he couldn't afford to survive. This is what his life had told him over and over again. That was all he was destined to experience in his life. Murray heard about just income and it felt unreal. He thought it might be a scam. It sounded too good to be true until we talked and he learned that it was put together by former prisoners and he felt like that we really got it. And so he gave us a chance. And when he got selected, it was randomly selected. He said it felt like a weight had been lifted off of him. And he knew right then that he could pay off his probation, that he could stay free. He said he felt free for the first time in a long time, truly free, true freedom. With his first GI payment, Murray bought a mobility scooter. He had had 2 botched hip surgeries while he was in prison, and it's hard for him to walk or stand up for very long. The scooter allowed him to visit his sick mother. It opened up his whole world, allowed him to get on the bus with a scooter and get around town, changed everything for him. With his second payment, he made and gave out 100 bag lunches to people experiencing homelessness because he had been homeless before in his life. He didn't want to just sit on the money for himself. He wanted to give back. We heard that time and again, I want to give. He also supported some loved ones, something he thought that he would never be able to do after he came home. Murray very eloquently talks about how the financial stability changed his life, how it eased his mind, it gave him peace. It let him breathe for the first time in years. He started to see himself differently, not just as someone with a criminal record, but someone who could actually make a difference. He saw himself as someone important and valuable. He is such a strong spokesperson for Just Income because of what it did for him, and he really believes that this can help a lot of other people. He is one of the most big-hearted people that I have ever had the privilege of meeting, and our community is so lucky to have him. I'm sorry he couldn't be here, but I'm grateful to share his story, at least some of his story, with you all tonight. He's such a sweet guy. We can move on. I'm hoping Clint's here. So he's here. We know, Just Income is part of a larger movement. And this is deeply tied to history, justice, and economic equity. And so to help us understand some of the historical context and broader significance of guaranteed income, I am so honored to introduce Clint Smith, who is a New York Times bestselling author and a leading voice in these critical conversations. His book, How the Word, won the National Book Critics Circle Award for nonfiction and was named one of the New York Times best books of 2021. He is also the author of the best-selling poetry collection Above Ground and the award-winning Counting Dissents. In addition to being a staff writer at The Atlantic, Clint is actually a valued member of our board here and a donor to Just Income. We are incredibly grateful for his support and his leadership in this work. Clint, thank you so much for being here with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for sharing these remarkable, beautiful stories and illuminating the importance of this work and how it works.
Yeah. Clint, would you be able to maybe put some of the current GI movement into a historical context?
Yeah, I mean, so a sort of brief version of it is that this is iterations of guaranteed income have been around for centuries in various cultures and various countries throughout the world. In the United States in particular, there was a lot of conversation, especially at the beginning of the 20th century, following the Great Depression, when there were conversations around what would be part of the sort of larger package of FDR's New Deal. These were conversations that were bubbling up, specifically academics from Europe who were coming over and having conversations and saying this was something that was really, that the US should take advantage of this moment in the same way that that the in Europe after World War I, but more particularly after World War II, they would go on to establish a social safety net that had not existed before World War II. Those conversations were happening even before World War II in the United States after the Great Depression, because these horrific moments of economic turmoil also provide opportunities to create new economic interventions. And with so many people experiencing poverty, in the 1930s, it was part of the sort of larger milieu of discussion, but did not necessarily, as a policy measure, become part of the New Deal, even though it shaped much of what New Deal legislation eventually became. There was a resurgence of those conversations during Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty in the 1960s. Johnson committed to himself to abolishing poverty and creating policy interventions on the federal level and hopefully influencing what happened on the state level that would eradicate poverty once and for all. As we know, that did not happen, but many of the most important policy measures, again, on a federal level, but also that went on to influence state and municipal level policies, took place over the course of the 1960s. The 60s, as we know, was a really radical time for reimagining what society might look like, again, building out of moments of extreme turmoil, economic turmoil, social turmoil, political turmoil. And Dr. King, as we would come to learn, himself became a huge proponent of guaranteed income. He said, quote, "I am now convinced that the simplest solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, guaranteed income, and a host of psychological changes inevitably will result from widespread economic security." And so by the late 1960s, Dr. King, as his own thinking around the intersection of race and economics and class was evolving, by the late 1960s, he was clear that guaranteed income provided the most robust and most holistic intervention in terms of alleviating the psychological and social and physical ills of people who were experiencing poverty. It was so much a part of the sort of social and political discussion that, like in 1969, presidential commission voted 22-0 that the U.S. should adopt guaranteed income for every needy American with no work requirements. The National Council of Churches voted on that. The Kerner Commission, the California Democratic Council, the Republican Ripon Society, and the 1972 Democratic Party platform as a whole endorsed guaranteed income. And so this is not a new thing. This was, coming out of the 30s and then more specifically coming out of the 60s. There was a lot of energy behind it. And a lot of the sort of most radical progressive policy of the 60s and 70s was born out of these discussions to use guaranteed income as the not necessarily a panacea, because as we know, it is not, as Lucius said, it is not in and of itself a panacea, but as one of the most effective means to alleviate the primary stressors of poverty that we know. And then, in the early 2010s, we came to a period for a range of reasons, but largely propelled by in the aftermath of Occupy Wall Street in 2011, where there were conversations about health, the sort of immense chasm of wealth disparity that existed in this country. And when we were having new conversations about the opportunity to redistribute wealth in a more equitable, more just, more fair, more historically, in a way that accounted for historical traumas, historical ills. There was a lot of energy after that, and certain political candidates, Bernie Sanders among others, have pushed iterations of guaranteed income as part of their sort of larger platform. So it's been a centuries-long project, but specifically in the U.S. over the last 100 or so years, has been part of our discussions to varying degrees.
Our work here, obviously, at Community Spring with Just Income, it's focused on folks who've been incarcerated before. Could you maybe just give a little bit of information on like why you think this population matters and why you personally support the work of this program?
Man, for so many reasons. I think, I wrote my dissertation on the experiences of people, the educational experiences specifically of people sentenced to life without parole. And so I worked in prisons. I both researched and taught in prisons for many years in Massachusetts and now in Washington, D.C. And so I have that sort of proximity to incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people that I think for any of us, I mean, so many people, all of us here, you all have been incarcerated or have worked in proximity and in community with incarcerated people. So many people on this call do so now. And what we know is that when you spend time with people who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, it becomes increasingly clear that but for the arbitrary nature of birth and circumstance, it very easily could have been any of us who found ourselves in these positions, who found ourselves in these situations. So who found ourselves in ways that made us in situations that might make us proximate to the entanglements of the criminal legal system. And as a result, it disabuses us of this idea that like there's certain people who deserve to be imprisoned and certain people who don't. And so as a result of that recognition and the sort of humility that comes from being proximate to the people who are in these spaces and a recognition that they are humans and fathers and mothers and daughters and brothers and people who are brilliant and also people who make mistakes in the same way that all of us are, it becomes clear, I think, that and once you take into consideration all of the impediments that people who are incarcerated experience once they leave the prison system. As we know, the majority of people who are incarcerated do not spend the rest of their life in prison. The vast majority of people go back into society, and as has been outlined, the folks who have a criminal mark on their proverbial resumes experience housing discrimination, employment discrimination, difficulty getting access to social benefits that might help them, more effectively protect themselves or support themselves, support their families. And so I think for me, what we know is that there are so many hurdles that exist when somebody leaves prison, and that formerly incarcerated people are amongst our most vulnerable populations. There are myriad of people who are deserving of guaranteed income opportunities. But we're thinking specifically about the formerly incarcerated population here. We know that there are, as the research demonstrates, as the sort of findings demonstrate in this from this research project, that we know there are meaningful, tangible things that can change in a person's life when they are coming out of prison if they are given a set of resources to help them move forward on that journey. And I think another part of this that's really important is, and that has been a part of the sort of journey of learning more about guaranteed income for me over the course of the last several years, is really leaning into and understanding, and not even just accepting, but embracing the idea that the whole purpose of this initiative is for people to decide for themselves what the best way to spend this money is. And that means that people are going to spend that money in a range of different ways. They might buy a scooter, they might buy a car, they might pay for their groceries, they might take their family on a vacation, they might buy their daughter a Christmas present, they might take themselves to get a lobster dinner because they've never done it before, right? And I think that sometimes when we have these conversations about guaranteed income, it can turn into is the person using this money, quote unquote, responsibly, or is this person using this money in a way that we approve of, or are they abiding by the sort of moral and ethical tacit standards that we expect of somebody who has been given this money? And I think that this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Part of what happens is when you recognize that, like, these are all people the same way you and I are people, these are humans the same way you and I are. We don't all spend our money in ways that are exactly aligned with what we tell ourselves we should be doing on our budget. And sometimes we spend money on things because it makes us feel good, because it makes our children feel good, because it makes us feel like we're contributing to something or to somebody else. So I say that because I think that if there can, in an effort to create narratives that such programs like this don't work, people can sometimes say, this person spent money on this, or this person spent money on this. And I think part of the acceptance and understanding of this program has to be a recognition that, one, in any program like this, you're going to have a range of different experiences, and people are human. And so some people will make mistakes, or some people will do things they regret. And some people will spend money in ways that make the most sense for them, in ways that we might not necessarily be able to understand or conceive of as being in the sort of within the contours of what we would deem a responsible use of that money. But that's okay, because what every person's situation is fundamentally different. And the great thing about guaranteed income is that it provides opportunities for people to make decisions on their own about what is best for them. It is not somebody else saying you have to spend this on food, or you have to spend this on diapers, or you have to spend this. Maybe they will, but also maybe it's going to be something that we can't even necessarily conceive of as being so important to them, that opens up something for them that allows the rest of their life to move forward. And I think, part of what I know we wanted to talk about, and we're running out of time, is narratives. But part of what we have to do is allow for narratives that exist beyond the sort of, it's almost like when we used to have conversations about, and sometimes do, immigration reform. And back in the 2010s, you would hear these stories about undocumented immigrants, and every story would be, this undocumented immigrant went to Yale, and this undocumented immigrant went to Harvard Law School, and this undocumented immigrant cured cancer, and this undocumented immigrant rescued somebody from a burning building. And those are great stories. But what can happen is that if those are the only stories that are lifted up, it can suggest that anybody who is not doing these remarkable things is somehow not deserving of the opportunity for citizenship. And I think there's a version of this here where we certainly want to lift up the people who are doing these remarkable, exceptional, beautiful things, because they're remarkable and they're beautiful. And we also need to make sure that part of the sort of larger narrative of this are the people who are using it in ways that are more maybe are less worthy of fireworks, but represent a sort of something really meaningful to them. And so just expanding our conception and our stories of what meaningful use of this money is and what responsible use of this money is I think also really important.
Yeah, 100 zillion%. Man, your words every time you cut right through the noise, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with us, sharing your insights. It really means the world to us here. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Clint. Thanks for being with us. Okay, so moving on. We obviously feel like we've made some really big strides here. And as has been pointed out, guaranteed income is just one piece of the puzzle. There is still some work to be done. We need policy reforms and a cultural shift that humanizes people with records. Too much of life after incarceration just hinges on the mercy of like a landlord or an employer. And even when those doors open, someone having financial stability is often what allows them to walk through that. Like Brian was a guy, a tent outside of the shelter. A landlord took a chance on him, and because he had guaranteed income, he had the resources to move in and he was able to stay. But not everyone is so lucky. We need fair chance housing reform. Stable housing remains a massive challenge. Legal discrimination against people with records keeps doors shut, no matter how hard they work. GI provides a buffer, but as we have heard, GI is a tool, but we need a full toolkit. So we need fair chance housing policies so people like Brian just don't have to rely on luck. Fines and fees, a lot of work to be done there. Too much of people's income is siphoned back into the system through fines, fees, and carceral debt. It just keeps people in perpetual hardship. We have continued to make great progress here, though. This year, we partnered with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition to erase our participants' carceral debt and restore their voting rights. We've really given people a clean slate. Amazing work. We are making moves to reduce commissary costs at our local jail so families aren't extorted just to support their loved ones. We are building a statewide strategy for fines and fees reform, and we continue to build national partnerships with groups like the Fines and Fees Justice Center to take this work even further. Speaking of narrative, we know policy change requires shifting public perception. That's why we have doubled down on our narrative change work, reshaping how justice impacted people are seen to build political will for reform. For example, because we have shifted the narrative locally, we now have a brick and mortar reentry center in Alachua County, which is designed, led, and staffed by formerly incarcerated people. This is a direct testament to the power of people with lived experience, sharing their stories and advocating for systemic solutions. Building community power. Most importantly, we are building community power. As Community Spring keeps growing, so does our ability to dismantle systemic barriers and break the cycle of incarceration. The potency of GI will only grow as we continue to expand community power and strengthen the reentry ecosystem here locally. We now have proof that when we trust and invest in people, we can help heal the harm caused by cycles of poverty and incarceration. This is a blueprint for change with clear economic and social benefits. And we must keep proving through our work, through our voices, that no one should be too poor to be free. Just Income works because we listen and adapt. From the start, lived experience and community feedback have shaped this program, because those most affected should drive the solutions. These are the true experts. And we will keep evolving. Our participants' wisdom, their genius, continues to shape and strengthen this work. And we know that we are not alone. Just Income is part of a growing movement that is proving that guaranteed income is a powerful tool for reentry. There's organizations like Equity and Transformation in Chicago, amazing. Step Up in Durham, amazing. The Center for Employment Opportunities, amazing. There are many, many more who are showing how income can transform lives and build pathways to stability. We are very proud to be in community with all these organizations, proving again and again that when we invest in people, everyone benefits. So this is where you can come in, you can get involved. If you would like to support this work, please feel free to donate. We are privately funded and we are led by lived experience. Every dollar goes towards keeping literal people out of literal cages. Just Income exists because of people who believe in this work. If you would like to be a part of creating lasting change, please consider investing in us. We're open to having a conversation. Advocate. Guaranteed income works. Help spread the word. Get involved in the guaranteed income space. There is a community of practice. There are many things you can plug into. Read our report. Share the report. Push for policies that eliminate fines and fees, expand housing access, and support economic justice. And then please just, stay involved. Join us in growing this movement. If you are interested in launching a guaranteed income program or learning about our practices, or just having a nice conversation, I'm here. Let's talk. We have worked with organizations, policymakers, and funders across the country to help bring guaranteed income to justice impacted people and beyond. You can email me, you can contact me through our website, whatever. And then please follow Community Spring on social media, keep up with what we have going on, and spread the word. Before we close, I didn't cuss one time, by the way, this entire thing. If you know me, you know how miraculous that is. I am so proud of myself right now. We have one more slide. I'm going to make it through it, I promise. Okay, so before we close, I want to take a moment to express deep, deep gratitude to the funders, organizations, coalitions, and individuals who have supported us. There are too many to name, but each one of y'all have really helped make this work possible. A very special thank you to the leadership and staff at the Center for Guaranteed Income Research for their diligent work in analyzing this very complex data. We know that this was not an easy one, and we deeply appreciate the dedication there. And thank you so much to Spitfire Strategies for their incredible support as we have launched our results into the public sphere now. A special thanks to you for being here, for taking the time to listen, to learn, to engage. Please keep showing up. Show up for yourself. Show up for each other. Thanks, y'all.